History remembers Napoleon as a genius. But what if I told you, maybe it wasn't brilliance that made him unstoppable? Maybe, just maybe, he only faced the dumbest lineup of commanders in European history. These were men who surrendered before a single shot was fired, who marched away from the sound of battle, who changed sides so often they made Europe look like a bad reality show. Tonight, we're counting down the biggest fools of the Napoleonic Wars. Proof that sometimes history isn't shaped by genius, but by complete clowns. Apologies to clowns. Let's begin. In 1805, Austrian General Karl Mack thought he was clever. He marched 27,000 men to the fortress of Ulm, convinced he could wait safely for reinforcements. His officers begged him to escape before Napoleon's trap closed. But Mack, puffed up with arrogance, dismissed every warning. Days later, the French had completely surrounded him. Hungry, wet, and hopeless, his men surrendered without a real fight. One of the greatest armies in Europe collapsed without a battle. Napoleon walked away with a bloodless victory, and Mack walked away with the title of Europe's most overconfident fool. Next comes Spain's Gregorio Garcia de la Cuesta, a man so stubborn he turned every battle into a disaster. In 1808 and 1809, he marched his men into hopeless fights again and again, ignoring advice from his own allies. He despised the British commander, Arthur Wellesley, later the Duke of Wellington, refusing to coordinate with him. Twice in a single year, his armies were crushed. His soldiers paid in blood for his arrogance, while he blamed everyone but himself. Spain wanted a hero. Instead, they got a disaster who mistook pride for strategy. Then there was Marshall Junot, one of Napoleon's trusted companions, who was supposed to secure Portugal. But instead of brilliance, he gave his men forced marches through brutal terrain, leaving them starving and broken by the time they reached Lisbon. The Portuguese king had already fled, and the city was his, but Junot failed to prepare for the uprising that followed. The British landed, the Portuguese rose up, and Junot's blunders left his men retreating in humiliation. Loyalty to Napoleon made him a marshal, but incompetence made him a failure. Joachim Murat, Napoleon's brother-in-law, was brave on horseback but foolish in everything else. Dressed in peacock feathers and covered in jewels, he thought style could replace strategy. He betrayed Napoleon, switched sides multiple times, and then tried to launch his own war against Austria. Within a month, his army was crushed. Desperate, he returned to Italy in another grand uniform, only to be captured and executed. Murat's story shows that courage without wisdom is just vanity on a horse. At Waterloo, Napoleon's fate depended on Marshal Grouchy. He was ordered to pursue the retreating Prussians and prevent them from joining the British. But when the cannons of Waterloo thundered in the distance, Grouchy kept marching away, following orders to the letter. His refusal to improvise allowed 50,000 Prussians to join the fight and tip the scales. Grouchy's obedience turned into disaster, and Napoleon's empire collapsed forever. One decision, one missed chance, ended everything. Spain had numbers, but not leadership. Generals like Castanos and Blake squandered their massive armies with outdated tactics and political favoritism. At Ocana in 1809, 50,000 Spaniards were crushed by half as many French. Again and again, Spanish generals proved that bravery without brains leads only to slaughter. Napoleon didn't need genius to beat them. He only needed patience. And finally, Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Ambitious, stubborn, and convinced of his divine mission, he pushed his empire into battles it was not ready for. At Austerlitz, he ignored his generals and presided over one of Russia's worst defeats. Years later, when Napoleon invaded, he allowed Moscow itself to burn rather than negotiate. Yes, Russia survived, and Alexander entered Paris in triumph. But his pride cost hundreds of thousands of lives, dragging Europe through years of needless bloodshed. A victor, yes, but also one of the great fools of the war. So there they stand, the proud, the arrogant, the foolish. Mack, who surrendered without fighting. Laquesta, who mistook stubbornness for strength. Junot, undone by exhaustion and addiction. Murat, the peacock king who betrayed everyone. Grouchy, who marched away from destiny. And Alexander, who mistook divine pride for strategy. Together, they remind us that history is not only written by geniuses, but also by idiots who make geniuses look great. And so, the Napoleonic Wars were shaped not only by brilliance, but by blunders. Every great empire falls, but sometimes it falls faster when its leaders are fools. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember this lesson. Pride and stubbornness destroy more than cannon fire ever could. Sleep well, dream softly, and good night.